Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Talkback, and let's get started here.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Welcome, everybody. This is Talkback. Talkback this morning is... Sorry, I had to take a quick run here for a second to get right my headphones. Talkback this morning is brought to you by Phillips Janitorial, offering both residential and commercial cleaning. No job is too big or small. Here's the number, 406-260-6617. Also brought to you by Y West Storage, out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. Give them a call, 406-510-0590. Because at Y West, we're making room for you. Also brought to you by 123 Seamless Gutters, family-owned and operated business, protecting the foundation of your future. Their number, 406-240-2669, and by Harrington Surgical Supply, where their mission remains the same, and that's to restore confidence and comfort into your daily life. Okay, we are here, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to have you along this morning. Ben Alke joining us in the studio. He is a candidate for Attorney General. Ben, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And good morning, Mr. Nick.
Good morning. You want to play that disclaimer really quick?
I think I thought I just did.
Oh, did you already?
But
I couldn't hear it. Okay.
Hang on just a minute. Let me see what I've got here. Let's see. Let's see what happens if I push this button.
If it played, it played, but I didn't hear anything. That's okay.
At Morgan Jewelers.
Dennis Bragg checking the weather after we start the day with some lingering showers that might be mixed with a little snow in spots. Skies will clear off for sunshine Thursday. It won't be very warm with highs only in the upper 40s. Mostly clear skies will allow the temperatures to plunge through Friday morning. Don't be surprised to see more areas down into the teens and low 20s. But sun will warm us to end the week with highs in the mid-50s Friday, the mid-60s by Saturday. Then clouds Saturday night with a chance of rain and back to a big change in the weather coming up on Sunday.
AM radio provides always-on news, sports, talk, traffic, and weather reports. It also delivers vital emergency information when your community needs it most. A new bill in Congress would ensure AM radio stays in your car, because when cell and internet services are down, this free emergency service is critical. Text AM to 52886 and tell Congress to support the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act.
Message and data rates may apply. You may receive up to 4 messages a month, and you may text STOP to stop.
This message furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
This is your captain. We are going to be experiencing some slight turbulence. Please fasten your... Oh, hold on. Just got a video of my cat.
Imagine the pilot of an airplane was as confident as you are texting and driving. Seems kind of crazy when you put it like that.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
We are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Peter Christian here, Nick Christensen are right over there. Joining us here in the studio this morning is Ben Alke, running for the office of Attorney General in the state of Montana. And I understand Va is waiting on the line with a question. So, Va, good morning, sir. You're on with Ben Alke. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. When the current Attorney General was running for office against Tim Fox, I called and asked him what he would do about prosecutorial misconduct, because prosecutorial misconduct always happens when both sides of the lawyers purposely fail to follow their professional code of ethics and violate the law. And I believe the current Attorney General at the time said that he would do nothing, and that to me just proves that there's just corruption. So, but my opinion on that I'll keep to myself. But I kind of want to ask him the same, just to see what he has to say about that. Thanks.
All right, thanks for the call, Bob. Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the question. It is, being a prosecutor is a great responsibility, because the prosecutors are the ones who can take away your freedom when they're bringing criminal charges. And they do have a duty to make sure that they're appropriately charging things, because you could have someone who might charge a crime more severely than it needs to try to force someone to plead. But the job of the Attorney General is you're supervising or overseeing what the county attorneys are. For the most part, you are trusting what their discretion is. If there were some reports of serious misconduct, it would have to be something like someone was withholding information that I should have turned over to the other side. Typically, the courts were going to resolve that. But the Attorney General has a role, I think, in setting the tone as the chief legal officer and the top prosecutor for the state, and just leading from the top by showing this is what the example is about how we're going to litigate. We're going to do it ethically. We're going to represent things truthfully. We're going to play by the rules. And we're going to ask other people, who are breaking the rules. If they break the rules, they get thrown in jail. The rules are important, and ethics are obviously very, very important.
All right. And so in what way is the current Attorney General not fulfilling that mission in your view?
Well, he had an issue with the representations that he were making to the court and what he made to the Montana Supreme Court. And when you're a lawyer, doesn't matter whether you're Attorney General or any other lawyer in the state, you need to follow what the rules of professional conduct are. And some of those rules involve respect to the court and following court orders. And there was an instance where the Montana Supreme Court issued an order, and his office wrote a letter to the court, said they didn't recognize the court's authority to issue the order, and they weren't going to follow it. And you just can't do that. I mean, that's lawyering 101. Most of the lawyers that I know, or all the lawyers that I know, when they saw that letter, thought that's really off for the chief legal officer and chief law enforcement officer of the state of Montana. And that's what's happened, is why he's got a recommendation to have his license suspended for 90 days now for that conduct. And to my knowledge, that's never happened. It's obviously never happened in Montana, but I don't know that it's ever happened in any other state in the country.
Now, who would make that decision? Would that be up to the Montana Supreme Court? Would it be up to the governor's office? Or is there a separate organization that handles that sort of thing?
So there's a separate group called the Commission on Practices, which is a group of lawyers, independent lawyers. There's 5 of them, I think, that heard the issue. And then they make a recommendation. Their recommendation goes to the Montana Supreme Court. So the court has overall supervisory authority over everything, but the trial and the decision about what the result should be is made by an independent group, because they're just lawyers and they're evaluating the conduct of their peers. And then the Supreme Court has the final say about whether they approve it or not.
So, is there a decision imminent, or is it still under consideration, or what?
So, just yesterday, the Commission on Practice recommended that his license be suspended for 90 days. That suspension doesn't take effect until the court approves it, and I think that doesn't happen for another 30 days. He has a right to appeal to the Montana Supreme Court. And then after that, the court will make a decision. And if they approve of the decision, then he will effectively be suspended from practicing law for 90 days.
Now, does that mean he would be suspended from his duties as Attorney General, or simply practicing the business of law?
I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question.
Because it's never happened before.
It's never happened before.
Right, yeah.
And under the Montana Constitution, in order to be the Attorney General, you have to be an attorney in good standing who's been an attorney for 5 years. And if you've been suspended, you're no longer an attorney in good standing. But what happens when you have a sitting attorney general get suspended so they can't practice the law? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question.
Well, now he has an office, right, and he has assistants and that sort of thing. So would it be possible for perhaps the associate attorney general or whoever his chief assistant is to step into that role for the next 30 days? Or because again, we're in uncharted territory here.
Yeah, I'm assuming that there's some process where he steps down, but it's strange because he was the one who was elected by the people to do that position.
Right.
And so, he doesn't litigate cases anyways, really, as the attorney general. He supervises everyone else who's litigating these things, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
And to me, this is all information that is it seems to be very troubling. And so I'm anxious to get Austin on the air to talk about it, and we hope that we can do that.
He's already scheduled, Peter.
Great. Yeah. He's scheduled. Wonderful.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. Excellent. So I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Our guest here in the studio is Ben Alke. He's running for the Office of Attorney General on the Democratic ticket. If you have a question or a comment for Ben, give us a call, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5685. 5309. Of course, as you know, we have the KGVO app, and you can just go to the App Store, download the app, and you can use the Message Us button to send a message to Nick, and we'll pass that along to our guests. So we're going to come right back after this quick timeout.
For breakfast.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good to have you along this morning. Welcome to Talk Back for Thursday, October 24th. Peter Christian here. That's Nick Christensen taking your calls, producing Talk Back, and joining us here in the studio. Of course, we are thrilled to have with us Ben Alke. He is a Democrat running for the office of Attorney General, and Sue is waiting on the line with a question. Good morning, Sue. What's on your mind, ma'am?
Good morning, Peter. I don't really have a question for Ben, but I not everyone is on social media, and so not everyone sees what Ben has to say there. But I just wanted to read this post that I saw this morning. It says, "I'm a former trooper who left after 3.5 years under Knutson. I loved my job. I loved serving people. I loved my coworkers. The agency was in a good place when Knutson took office. From that moment, communication, moral trust, and serving the public were put on the back burner, and the agency has been spiraling down ever since. Knutson isn't the only issue, but he is in charge. I have never once voted for a Democratic candidate before, but I am voting for you. I sincerely hope you will bring accountability, communication, and quality of leadership to Montana." I just wanted your listeners to hear that because they probably haven't heard anything, because the Republican Party seems to be running a race where they don't talk to anyone. They just go by the R behind their name. And I really would like people to consider Ben, because he is a very good lawyer and he's a very good candidate, and I hope people will vote for him.
Well, Sue, thanks for the call. That must warm you to hear something like that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope there's more people out there who want to call in to say that.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the Highway Patrol, because we had mentioned that there has been some turmoil, as Sue just mentioned. There's been some turmoil within that very important agency that's overseen by the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, there's been a lot of turmoil. In fact, my neighbor is a highway patrolman, former highway patrolman, and they have low morale and there's staffing issues. And we're in the middle of a drug crisis. And what we need to be doing right now is in supporting our law enforcement officers to make sure that they have the resources they need. You need to make sure that the highway patrol is fully staffed so that it can do its job. And there's been overreach from the bureaucrats into the operations of the Highway Patrol. And in particular, there's been too much overreach by the Attorney General. The job of the Attorney General with the Highway Patrol is to appoint the colonel and then let the colonel run the Highway Patrol.
Right.
You don't need to get into what their operations are or what their hiring is. And I think a lot of the officers are not happy with how their operations have been interfered with the Attorney General. They're not getting paid enough. They're overworked. They're underappreciated, and they need more support.
And I will tell you this, in our many conversations with the current Attorney General, we've heard that Montana is such a huge state, area-wise, and that each highway patrol trooper, especially on the eastern part of the state, has an enormous amount of territory to cover, and primarily just all by their loans themselves. And so that's got to be something, as the Attorney General, whoever the Attorney General is, they've got to be deeply concerned about their safety and their support.
That's right. It's all about resources and support. Eastern Montana, you don't have enough highway patrolmen out there, and they also serve an important role working with the sheriffs and other local law enforcement officers. And, they did a study, and I don't know if you've heard this, they did what's called a climate survey of the troopers, and this came out, and it's been a bit of a controversy. And the troopers rated what they thought about their leadership, and that is the Attorney General. And their comments on leadership were very unfavorable. And it's that sort of thing that's why I'm running. You don't want things like law enforcement or the highway patrol to be political. The way things work is typically the more political they get, the worse they work. Because your criteria when you're making decisions is just, what do the officers need? How can we support them? If you start thinking about politics, you're thinking about the wrong thing. You need to be thinking about doing your job and focus on that.
And so, have you had a chance to be in a debate with the current Attorney General?
No, because he won't show up.
Okay.
I've asked him to have a debate. There were other associations that asked him to have a debate. There was actually one, the Billings Rotary Club scheduled one based on his schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down to Billings to have the debate with him. And
that's a long way from here.
Yeah, and he didn't show up.
Right.
You know, the whole Rotary Club was there. There was a lunchtime thing. It was supposed to start at noon, and 1 minute before noon, someone came in and said he's not going to be there.
And what was the response from the Rotary Club?
Well, I mean, they were disappointed that he didn't show up, but I had an opportunity to talk to a bunch of nice people in Billings, uninterrupted.
It's a time for a soliloquy here.
Yeah. But I think this is one of the problems. You know, one of the problems we have these days is just getting accurate information, you know, and I think people are living in their own silos and they're not talking enough. And when you're trying to reach out to people, you need to reach out to people to find them where they are to have those conversations. And that's why it's so important to have a debate and have like a civil, professional debate. You know, if it was up to me, election season would be like 3 months long, and it would just involve the two candidates traveling around Montana, having joint appearances, and then people could come see them in person, watch them interact, listen to them, and make a decision based on that.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. That's a big lift.
Yeah. Anyway, our phone lines are open, by the way, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. And, of course, with the KGVO app, you can ask a question without even having to call in. Just download the KGVO app and hit the Message Us button, and that will be immediately passed along to Nick, and we will make sure that Ben will be able to talk about that. Our guest here in the studio is Ben Alke. He's a Democratic candidate for the office of Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state of Montana. So if you have a question or comment, we would love to hear from you. We'll be right back after this timeout.
With a little help.
Dennis Bragg checking the weather after we start the day with some lingering showers that might be mixed with a little snow in spots. Skies will clear off for sunshine Thursday. It won't be very warm with highs only in the upper 40s. Mostly clear skies will allow the temperatures to plunge through Friday morning. Don't be surprised to see more areas down into the teens and low 20s. But sun will warm us to end the week with highs in the mid-50s Friday, the mid-60s by Saturday, then clouds Saturday night with a chance of rain and back to a big change in the weather coming up on Sunday.
Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakimick, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. Store all your guns securely. Help stop suicide. My service never stops.
Brought to you by End Family Fire and the Ad Council.
Hey, welcome back. This is Talk Back, and we're spending this hour with Ben Alke. He's the Democratic candidate for Attorney General here in the studio with us. And we have folks waiting on the line. This is Mike. Mike, good morning. What's your question for Ben Alke? Go ahead, please.
Oh, I just have a couple comments if I can make them, please.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Ben. I already filled out my ballot. I filled in the oval next to your name and turned that ballot in already. Anyway, I've watched Austin. I'm one of the weirdos that watches a lot of the state legislature, and I watched him over the years at the legislature. And, you know, I find him less than honest, and just to be completely upfront, I think he's very arrogant. And I've called in and asked him a couple questions here and there when he's been on. And one was the topic of conversation was integrity. And I called in and I said, is Donald Trump a man with integrity when he's calling up the Georgia Secretary of State and asking for 11,780 votes? And this was a full year after Donald Trump had done that. And Austin said he did not know anything about that. Well, I found that very strange and dishonest, I think, in his position. I mean, who didn't know about that conversation? Well, that was one thing. He also one time said when he was going to law school here, he feared for his safety and his family's safety. Well, that really caught my ear because I've been in Missoula since the late 70s. I've never heard a man, woman, or a child say they didn't feel safe in Missoula. So I think he was just trying to drum up probably something to go after the regents with, you know, not feeling safe so he could get some leeway there to carry and conceal or whatever on campus. And the third thing, I think sometimes he just leaves out some information. I applaud his efforts to stop the drug and the sex trafficking. But, there was a 60 Minutes on a couple of months ago. 2/3 of the fentanyl coming into the States is coming in by U.S. citizens, and I think he leaves out that U.S. citizens. It's not all illegal immigrants doing it. 2/3 is coming in U.S. citizens. So thanks for your time. I'll listen to any comments on the radio.
Thank you for the call. Your thoughts, Ben.
Well, thank you. I think the first thing, my first takeaway there is your job as the Attorney General and any politician is to tell the truth. And you need to also tell the truth if someone on your side is doing something that's not good. I think that's one of the reasons why politics has become too extreme. Your job, whatever you're elected to, is to represent the people of the state. It is not to represent the political party. And so the interests of your party or what anybody else is doing, that's really not a factor. You're there to represent the people. And to do that effectively, you just have to be honest, tell the truth, work hard, and do your best. The other things, we do have an issue with fentanyl. We do have a drug crisis. And the southern border is an issue. We do need to secure it better. We need to take steps to do it. But there's no silver bullet here. That's not, you can beef up the border as much as we can, but it's not going to stop the fentanyl from coming in.
Well, demand has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it does. And it's coming in through ports. It's coming in through Canada. It's coming in, with U.S. citizens. It's easy to manufacture. It's small. It's cheap. And what you need to do is focus on what is happening within the border of the state of Montana to make sure that we're doing everything we can to stop the cartels from operating here. And that involves, again, supporting officers and focusing on the basics.
All right, let's get another call in. This is Kevin, I believe. Kevin, good morning. You're on Talkback with Ben Alke. Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for taking our calls. Ben, I grew up in an era where you didn't spit on the sidewalk. You were well-behaved, and you were raised with moral values, okay? It just seems like our laws are now a joke. They're not taken seriously or enforced, even by police officers. I've seen them driving up and down the road, and you see violations occur in front of them. And it's like they've given up of trying to enforce laws. One of the laws that really has gotten me to think about this is with the headlights on the roads nowadays. 600 luminums were the norm of everybody having headlights on, even when you put your brights on. Nowadays, these lights are coming in on these vehicles to where you can see the hair on a rodent's behind, and they're blinding you, and I think they're causing accidents and probably even deaths. I'd like to know what your position is on enforcing laws such as that here in the state of Montana.
All right. So is there a law that you know of, Ben, because you've been in the business for a long time? Is there a law regulating how bright headlights can be?
My guess is yes. I don't know that for certain because I haven't litigated it.
Right.
But my guess is, there's probably a standard that's set. And if the standards are being violated, then that is a problem. I mean, I've noticed that, too, driving around the state. Sometimes I'll drive by someone and I'll flash them because I think their brights are on, and then they flash me back, because their brights aren't. And I think it is a safety issue. And the bigger issue here is that is the purpose of laws. If you're going to pass a law, well, you got to enforce it. We're making rules. If we all decide that this is the rule that we want to follow because it's in the best interest of the people to protect their safety or for whatever reason, then you got to enforce it. Because if you're not going to enforce it, then what's the point, right? And I think that that's something that happened in the bigger cities during COVID where they made some serious mistakes, was there are laws that existed that they decided they weren't going to enforce. And I think we all saw what was happening there. That's not good. The people, the honest people, the good working people, the people who are around this state and around anywhere, they just want safety. They want security. They don't want to have to worry about these things, and they want to have trust that the government is going to do its job and that the police officers are going to do their job, and they're going to protect us.
All right, let's get another call in. Nancy is on the line. Nancy, good morning. You're on with Ben Alke. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, morning, Glory. I'm pretty upset the way our Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, is getting attacked. I know him. He is a workaholic, a type A type person. As far as integrity and honesty, I think the man has always been up front. He has really many, many irons on the fire. And you're talking about fentanyl and an open border. We don't have a crisis at the open border. We have an open border is what we have, and it's this Biden administration that has opened the border. And he has fought to close the border and to stop bringing this crap into our state. And he has my 100% support. He has my vote. And I really don't like what you're saying about his character. No. I just can't agree with anything that you're saying here, and that's all I've got to say today.
Nancy, thanks for the call. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, thanks, Nancy. And look, I understand. I agree with you that the southern border is an issue, and he needs to do better security, and that the federal government has failed. But I also got to tell you that if someone is running for office in Montana telling you that they're going to fix the southern border, then they're not telling you the truth, because no one in Montana has the ability to fix the southern border because it's a federal issue. And, you know, with respect to Mr. Knudsen's character, I have never and would never say anything about him personally. I wouldn't say anything about his family. I wouldn't say anything about who, you know, how he conducts himself personally. In fact, I've heard he's a nice person to talk to. But the fact of the matter is, just as a matter of law, that mistakes have been made. And you have to hold people account for the mistakes that they make in office, because they have a duty to protect us and to serve us. And if they're making mistakes, there needs to be consequences for that. We need to get someone in here who's not going to make mistakes.
All right, then with that, we're up against another break. We're going to come right back. Harry is waiting to visit with you. Several other phone lines are open, by the way. If you have a question for Ben Alke, he's a Democrat running for the office of Attorney General for the state of Montana. One of the primary offices from the state of Montana, the chief law enforcement officer of the state. So if you have a question for him, we'd love to hear from you, either on the phone or via the KGVO app. We're coming right back after this.
Call 123.
Some of the best sounds you'll ever hear are generic. Safe. Effective. Even money-saving. Just like FDA-approved generic drugs. Even if they don't come in the exact same color or shape as their brand name equivalents, they have the same key ingredients and go through a rigorous review process. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today and visit fda.gov/generic drugs. Generics are safe, effective, and can save you money. You'll like the sound of that.
Need to replace your Social Security card? In most states, you can request one online with a My Social Security account. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can also get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Welcome back to Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. The KGVO app can help let you message us with a question for our guest, who's Ben Alke, Democratic candidate for Attorney General. Harry is waiting through the break. So, Harry, thank you for your patience. Sir, what's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning, Ben. Yeah, first I'll just comment on Austin Knudsen. He seems like he spends a whole lot of time playing partisan political games. I mean, he seems always in the news, attacking the federal government about this or that, the other thing. And also, he has something about his campaign where he talked somebody else to run a primary just so he could raise more money, and the guy wasn't even really campaigning against him, or it seemed pretty fishy. But then it seems to me that Austin just is trying to get the next step up, maybe governor or senator or whatever the next time. But I'm wondering, if you get to be the Attorney General, are you going to focus more on Montana problems and stay away from so much of the, the cultural war crap?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the call, Harry.
Absolutely. I am sick and tired of the culture wars. And if I'm the Attorney General, I don't expect that you're going to hear from me a whole lot. The job of the Attorney General, it's kind of like the offensive line in football. You shouldn't hear about him unless something's going wrong. And your job is to not get involved in the political game That's where, legislators, you want to run for Congress, you want to run for governor. That's where those conversations are supposed to take place. The Justice Department is not the place for politics, and you shouldn't make decisions in the Justice Department to try to set yourself up for the next race, because if you're doing that, you're putting your own interests above the interests of the people that you're representing. And the people you're representing, the people in this state, they just want basic law enforcement done well. The other comment you had about his fake candidate, that's true. So in Montana, and by the way, money is a problem in politics. There's too much money involved in politics, and I think everyone is just sick and tired of all the commercials and all the stuff. And we have campaign limits, and so you can get $790. That's the most anyone could donate. Mm-hmm. But if you have an opponent in the primary, you can get double that. And so Austin asked a friend of his who was not qualified to run for attorney general to run against him in the primary so that he could get $1,580 from his wealthy donors. And the kid that ran against him hadn't been a lawyer long enough to run for attorney general. And Austin came out and said that he asked him to run because he thought our campaign finance laws were ridiculous and it allowed him to raise more money. And, none of those things are helping the state of Montana. Yet money in politics isn't helping. Trying to manipulate the system is not helping. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the state. You got to lead by example. And that's the last place you need that sort of conduct is the Attorney General's office.
KGVO. All right. More phone calls coming in. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And Nick is on the phone right now. We also have an app question standing by. We appreciate folks using the app to message us, and that way we can get these messages to our guests. Of course, today, Ben Alke joining us here in the studio. He's a Democratic candidate running against the incumbent Austin Knudsen. And so we would love to hear from you. If you have a question for Ben, that's why we're here today. Go ahead, Nick, please.
We have Doug.
All right, Doug, good morning, sir. You're on Talkback. What's on your mind?
Well, the running attorney general, he states he's not political, but everything's political now with all the money coming into the state from dark sources, and including the Soros, Open Society, with all these voter initiatives. It's a fact of life. Everything's political in this country now, and you're going to have to deal with it. But my main question was, what about the voting machines that we were supposed to purchase from South Dakota that guaranteed could not be accessed by the internet, and they were contracted after the 2020 election, and then they said they couldn't use them in the 2022 election because there was a glitch in the system. I was wondering if you could shed some light on what's going on there and what he thinks about that.
Okay, thanks for the call. That's news to me, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I hear you that you're skeptical that everything's political and there's money involved. And look, that's the problem. That is the problem, is that everything is political, and it's the problem that money is involved.
Well, money has been equated with free speech.
Yeah.
And whenever you do that, then all of a sudden it's sacrosanct.
Yep, and that's not going to change because of the Citizens United decision. There's not going to be money removed from politics. But all you can do is do your best, and there's there's question of degrees, and you just got to do your best to try to remove politics to the best you can. And if you fail, and I think that's the problem when you look at what is happening in our country, is our leaders are failing to remove politics, to make interests in the best interests of the people, rather than making decisions on their best interest or the best interest of their party. As far as the voting machines, I don't know anything about that. I wish I did, but I don't have an answer for you. I think that would probably be more for the Secretary of State because they're the ones who manage the elections.
Correct. We have our own county election administrators as well. So, yeah. We're going to come right back. I want to give Skip plenty of time to ask his question and get an answer rather than have him ask, and then we take a break and then you answer. So we'll take a break right now. We have Skip, Emmett, and Jeff all waiting to visit with our guest here in the studio, Ben Alke. He is a Democrat running for the office of Attorney General. We'll be back right after this.
heating.
Welcome back to Talkback, everybody. Glad to have you along. Nick Christensen over there producing Talkback. I'm Peter Christian. Ben Alke, Democratic candidate for Attorney General, is here in the studio with us. And Skip is waiting to talk with you. Skip, good morning. You're on with Ben. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning, Ben. I'll try to make it quick because maybe you answered this already or have talked about it. I didn't tune in until 8:30. So the reason that I'm asking this because I saw you on one of those informational minutes about officers on the PBS channel, and you were talking about your position on the public lands that would. And I think it was you that was talking about how you would bank the public or the lands that were not. Could you be on the land board, if I'm not mistaken, if you became Attorney General, and what you would do, or how you would handle public lands that you thought were non-productive, and you would bank them and sell them? I think that's what I heard. Would you please explain if that's correct?
Okay, thanks for the call, Skip. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, sure. So, the Attorney General sits on the land board, and the land board plays
a very important
role.
position, by the way, yeah.
It plays an important role in public access. And, a big part of our way of life in Montana is public access. And it's becoming even more important as things are becoming more crowded, and it's harder and harder to find ways to get into the mountains or in the rivers or wherever it is without being too crowded. The land banking program allows the state to sell land and then acquire other land. And so in Montana, we have some parcels of land that no one can get to. Let's say you have a parcel of land that's just completely surrounded by a ranch, for example. What you can do with the land banking program is sell that parcel of land to the ranch that has the public land surrounded, and then go use that money to get another piece of land that people can access. And so the land banking program can be used to improve public access so that we have more public access or more land that is publicly accessible.
Yeah, the general rifle season actually starts this Saturday.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, let's get Skip. I believe Emmett is on the line. Emmett, good morning. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Well, I'm definitely voting for Austin Knudsen. I mean, I've talked with him in the past. He's very constitutional. When he wants to talk about the southern border, he's not saying he can fix the southern border. He's simply saying he's addressing what we need to do to close the border at a federal level, and he wants to take on the fentanyl crisis here in Montana. He knows that's a local issue. I told him about my experience about being profiled in Lewiston for having a mohawk, and he knew that was very unconstitutional. And so he's not only pro-law enforcement, but pro the Constitution. I don't like these attacks on his character about what he's done with, like, money. Or you talk then about money in politics. There have been money in politics on the Democrat side for years, not just Republicans. I guess my question is, how would you be a constitutional attorney general like Austin Knudsen is, love the United States Constitution, our Bill of Rights, that kind of thing? Right. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to do that.
We're running short of time. Let's let him answer that question. Thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Yeah, Emmett, I mean, the number one job of the Montana Attorney General is to uphold the rights guaranteed by the Montana Constitution. And that is your job. You're the chief legal officer of the state. And I am absolutely in support of freedom and constitutional rights. And freedom means the government can't come after you for certain things. Freedom is what protects us from the government. Our constitutional rights are what protect us from the government. And I support that wholeheartedly, whether it's the right to bear arms or, the right to make your own decisions about your body.
All right. Do we have time for one more call? Nope. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. What we ordinarily do here is we give the candidate who is here in the studio an opportunity to jump up on the soapbox. We don't have one, but we've got a microphone. So if you would like to, just for the next minute or two, share why people should vote for Ben Alke, why you're running and why they should vote for you.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm running, and this may sound old-fashioned, but I think that the United States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world. And for the last 250 years, our country has been the greatest force for good around the world, spreading freedom and democracy. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect. Mistakes have been made, and we're still getting better. We're still growing. In order to continue to grow, we have to work together, and we have to agree on some basic principles. And one of those basic principles is that the administration of justice needs to be fair and impartial. Doesn't matter what your race is, doesn't matter what your religion is, doesn't matter what your gender is, doesn't matter what your political party is. Everyone should be treated the same under the law. And during my lifetime, we've been lucky to have attorney generals who understood that. Mark Roscoe, Joe Mazurek, Mike McGrath, Steve Bullock, Tim Fox, all represented the state of Montana with integrity and with credibility. And the current attorney general, frankly, has not lived up to the standard of his predecessors. He's failed the state of Montana by not honoring that office and by making decisions that are political and are legally incorrect. He has violated the law. He talks about freedom. He sent a highway patrolman to a hospital in Helena to interfere with the decisions that were being made by physicians there. It's not legal for the attorney general to send a highway patrolman to a hospital. Highway patrolman doesn't have the jurisdiction to respond to that. Your responsibility as the attorney general is to protect our safety, to uphold our constitutional rights, not interfere with our safety or our constitutional rights.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind, we have about another minute here. If you have some contact information, if folks want to donate to your campaign, they can read more about you online. How do they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on the internet, alkeformontana.com, or maybe it's alkeformt.com. And I'm happy to respond to any emails or questions we get by that. I think that we want to have transparency here. I want people to know what their choices are. I understand that, things are pretty divisive right now. We've got an election coming up. If you want to make things better, I think it's up to all of us to take a look at who's on the ballot, think about who they are, and make informed decisions.
Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you. Thanks for answering all the questions that came your way, and we really appreciate you taking the time. And you've been traveling a long way to run for a statewide office, and we appreciate you stopping by today.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Nick. It was a pleasure.
You bet. It's a pleasure meeting you, sir. All right, so we are going to take a quick commercial break because in the next hour we're going to continue talking about politics because Dan Wilson is running for the seat on the Montana Supreme Court, and we're going to be visiting with him. He's going to be in studio just like Ben was. And so we'll be taking questions for him from you starting next hour. So give us a call, 721-1290. We'll be right back after this quick timeout.
This is Talkback, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is hour number 2 of Talkback for this Thursday, October 24th. Talkback this morning brought to you by Harrington Surgical Supply, where you can feel confident in their discreet and knowledgeable guidance on a multitude of products and medical supplies. Also brought to you by 123 Seamless Gutters, family owned and operated with gutter installations. And don't forget, get those gutter guards installed now before winter arrives. Call 406-240-2669, protecting the foundation of your future. Y West Storage has a storage unit for you out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. Want to find out more? 406-510-0590. Because of Y West, they're making room for you. And by Phillips Janitorial, with both cleaning for your home and your business. They do it all. No job is too big or small for Phillips. Here's their number, 406-260-6617.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
We are definitely focusing on politics today. I'm Peter Christian. That is Mr. Nick Christensen. Good morning, Mr. Nick.
Good morning.
All right. We are privileged to have with us in the studio Dan Wilson, who's running for the office of Justice for the Montana Supreme Court. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Now, if you wouldn't mind, for those who don't know, give us a little bit of background about Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on with both of you, and I look forward to the questions from your callers. I am a judge from Flathead County. I've been on the district court bench since 2017, so I've been elected twice. My family comes from north central Montana. My folks both grew up on the High Line in Malta. That's where my great-granddad homesteaded in the early 1900s. And I was born in Billings. When I finished my law school education, I came back to Great Falls to practice as a prosecutor. I worked also as a prosecutor in Blaine County in Chinook for about a year before I took a job as a lead prosecutor in Kalispell for the county attorney's office. And then I started in a private practice about 2000, went on the bench for the Justice of the Peace Court in 2011, and here I am now running for the Montana Supreme Court. There are 2 vacancies. I'm running for the Associate Justice position.
All right. Now, the obvious. Now, we already have folks waiting on the line, but my obvious question to you is why the leap? Obviously, you've been working in the smaller courts, the county courts, things like that. So the Montana Supreme Court is basically the place where many of these cases actually end up to be adjudicated. So why do you want to be a part of that court?
Well, it's not much of a leap, really, from where I am now. I'm in the general jurisdiction trial court. The district courts handle just about every sort of case that possibly can be handled in Montana. The Supreme Court is the next logical step in the progression. And I have such a wide variety of experiences, both as an attorney and as a judge. As a lawyer, I practiced on both sides of cases, both plaintiffs and defendants. I was a prosecutor and I did some criminal defense as well. I handled contract disputes, will disputes, and every sort of claim that might possibly be brought in Montana. And so this is just a natural progression for me, and I love the law. I mean, that's the reason I'm running. I love the law. I want to see it upheld. I want to see it consistent. I want to see it transparent, and I want Montanans to be able to count on it in their day-to-day affairs, knowing that our Supreme Court is keeping our law according to our Constitution and what the legislature adopts for us.
Okay, let's jump right in here. Get Harry on the line. Harry, good morning. You're on with Dan Wilson. Go ahead. What's your question, please?
Yeah, good morning, Dan. Yeah, I hear on your ads that you say you will not legislate from the bench. So if the legislature interprets the Constitution one way and pass a law or a bill, but then you disagree with that, you think have a different interpretation, whose interpretation do you follow? Since if you deny the legislature their interpretation, isn't that legislating? You're overriding they are the legislators, so their interpretation, should their interpretation override the Supreme Court or what? How does that work?
Well, the legislature has primary authority to adopt our rules and our laws here in Montana, and the Supreme Court should only overrule and say that a statute or something adopted by the legislature is unconstitutional, not if the justices on the Supreme Court believe or feel that way, but if the Constitution itself, the language of the Constitution, is been transgressed or offended somehow by the legislation. So not legislating from the bench means precisely what I think you're putting your finger on here, and that is justices don't rely on their own opinions, their own preferences, if they're acting correctly, in my view. Instead, they go to the language of the Constitution itself to determine whether an act is constitutional. And our job and our obligation, actually, as justices of the Supreme Court, is to uphold and affirm the legislature unless it is shown by the challenger, not by the justices, by the person challenging the statute, that it is unconstitutional beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is the highest standard of proof, the highest legal standard in our law, and so it must be undertaken with great care.
So that even though the language can be not so clear in the Constitution, the Supreme you're going to pretty much rubber stamp whatever the legislature wants. Then
no, I'm not saying I'm going to rubber stamp it. I think that's an offensive way to put it, frankly, and from the wrong side of things. But it's not the duty of the court to second-guess the legislature. It's the job of the Supreme Court to uphold and affirm what our people's representatives have adopted through a legal process as the law in Montana, unless the challenger can show that it offends the Constitution beyond a reasonable doubt, as I mentioned before.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the call. And with that, we're up against a break. 721-1290 is our number. Buck is waiting to visit with you. And we have 7 other phone lines open in addition to using the KGVO app. It's a very effective way to get your question answered. Just download the app, hit the Message Us button. Nick will pass that along to Dan Wilson, and we'll get your question answered, even though you can't be on the phone with us, although we'd love that too. So we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back and Judge Dan Wilson here in the studio right after this.
Dennis Bragg checking the weather after we start the day with some lingering showers that might be mixed with a little snow in spots. Skies will clear off for sunshine Thursday. Won't be very warm with highs only in the upper 40s. Mostly clear skies will allow the temperatures to plunge through Friday morning. Don't be surprised to see more areas down into the teens and low 20s. But sun will warm us to end the week with highs in the mid-50s Friday, the mid-60s by Saturday. Then clouds Saturday night with a chance of rain and back to a big change in the weather coming up on Sunday.
Hey, welcome back to Talk Back. It's been a morning full of politics this morning. And of course, we have Dan Wilson running for the office of Justice of the Montana Supreme Court. And Buck has been waiting the longest. Buck, good morning. You're on with Dan Wilson. Go ahead.
Well, good morning. I think I'm detecting a theme already on this segment. Rob Nadelson, the former constitutional law professor at the UM, appears on this, comes on the show frequently. He's kind of implied that the state Supreme Court is liberal, and as you touched on with Harry, kind of maybe use technicalities or other means to thwart legislation. I know you can't comment on your viewpoint going forward specifically, but could you give us a couple of specific issues that you think in the past where the state Supreme Court acted perhaps politically rather than, as you recently described here, purely constitutionally?
Well, I think we can take their own word for it. There was a case that was decided here recently where the Supreme Court was asked to review the constitutionality of 4 statutes enacted by our legislature that impacted the way that we vote and the way that we register and the way that we prove who we are when we go to vote. And in that case, the majority struck down all 4 statutes, but there were 2 dissenters. And in the dissent, I saw words written that I didn't think I would ever see appear in writing in a Montana Supreme Court opinion. The dissenter said that the majority was acting like a super legislature, and they accused the majority of engaging in rationale that they called a cascading sleight of hand. And I think that's a polite way for the dissenters of accusing the majority of using something less than fully honest sort of reasoning. So don't take it from me, take it from the 2 dissenters. And that is an opinion in dissent that I believe, at least for a couple of the members of the Supreme Court, indicates that their views that the majority can on occasion engage in what is essentially a politicized decision as opposed to a purely legal one.
All right. And let's move along. Let's get Mark on the line. Mark, good morning. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I kind of stole some of my thunder. The last question was one that I had. If the Supreme Court is reviewing constitutional initiatives, I heard the argument that it can only change one aspect of the Constitution at a time for each initiative, and that they've approved some that did change 2 or more places, denied some that did or didn't. And how do you interpret what constitutes more than one change in the Constitution?
Well,
thanks for the call.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is that whether a particular initiative offends that one subject or one topic rule is in the eye of the beholder, and the beholder is the Supreme Court. You can look at their decisions over time and disagree with their conclusion that a particular initiative addressed more than one topic in violation of the law or not. But there is some room for looking at those decisions over time and coming to a reasonable conclusion that their analysis is not always consistent. You've put your finger on the rule. The problem, if there is any, is in the Supreme Court's decisions themselves. And this is something that I view as very important. Following precedent, it doesn't matter if a particular justice likes an initiative, wants to see it put before the voters, wants to see it pass or fail. We have to impose upon ourselves as justices the self-discipline to be consistent from one case to the other. And if there is a widespread view among Montanans that they are not exercising this authority in a consistent fashion, then it's perhaps time to change the personnel on the Supreme Court, because what they say is final.
All right, let's move on. Let's get Jeff on the line. Jeff, good morning. You're on with Dan Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Dan? I want to let you know that I did vote for you. I voted for the Sons of Liberty last week, earlier this week, rather, and good luck to you in your contest.
Thanks so much.
Kind of piggybacking off the last caller, what are some of the decisions in the past? I know you can't talk about anything pending before the court currently, but in the past, what are some of the decisions that you thought the court decided wrongly? And more broadly, where does this one issue rule come from? Is that part of the Constitution, the Montana Constitution?
Right.
Or is that something that's a legal fabrication by the court itself?
No, it's part of the law regarding our Constitution. And your other question about have I felt that the court got some decisions wrong? The short answer is that if the Supreme Court decides it, then it becomes the law and we have to follow it. And I can tell you that I was very confused by a recent decision of our Supreme Court overruling almost 30 years of precedent, and in the process decided that it's unconstitutional for our legislature to mandate criminals to pay a fine. And it was in the context of a multiple DUI offender. Ultimately, they decided the Constitution does not allow a judge to impose a fine ordered by the legislature until the judge finds that the person is actually capable at that time of paying it. And it was overruling precedent of about 30 years to the contrary. But the basis for the decision, and this was the confusing part for me, is that they decided that on the basis that fines disadvantage disproportionately people of color and minorities, that the more enlightened view is not to impose these fines. But in that case, they say, facts and law are what drive decisions in cases. But in that case, the defendant, who was the subject of this brand new constitutional rule, wasn't a minority and wasn't a person of color. He was a 77-year-old single white male living in and around Libby, Montana. So that one was thoroughly confusing to me, and it didn't seem like the facts backed up their conclusion.
Okay, with that, we're up against another break. We're going to come right back. We have Skip and Steve both waiting to visit with you. Our guest here in the studio is Dan Wilson. He's running for to be a justice on the Montana Supreme Court. So the highest court in our land, the court of last resort, if you will, before it goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we're going to come right back. If you have a question or comment, we would love to hear from you. That's why he's here, is to answer your questions. So whether it's on the phone or through the KGVO app, we hope you'll get busy and send it to us. We'll be right back after this.
Montana State News Network.
I'm Dennis Bragg. Bozeman firefighters say they now have to navigate an additional 90 miles of streets that have been built since voters last approved a fire department levy. Battalion Chief Gene Short tells us that proposed construction of Fire Station 4 at Cottonwood and Huffine would provide a critical component to improving response times across the city.
What's happening now, since there aren't any fire stations there, is a call comes in near that intersection, and we're having to pull resources from other parts of town to get there. It's taking them longer to get there, and it's taking them out of district. So they might leave from Station 2's district, and now Station 2 has a big gap. So this helps balance our resources strategically across town so we could cover calls wherever they may come up.
The proposal is similar to one approved by Missoula voters last summer. A 60-year-old Great Falls man is facing a mandatory decade of prison time, plus a $10 million fine after pleading guilty to federal charges for dealing what U.S. Attorney Jesse Laslovich calls a staggering amount of meth. Federal prosecutors had accused Daniel Allen Wakeford of supplying meth to local dealers, laundering his profits, profits, and at one point storing more than 100 pounds of meth in an Arizona storage unit. That's enough for more than 362,000 doses on the street. Prosecutors say Wakefield had been dealing for about 4 years when investigators apprehended a customer who told them he'd helped Wakeford package several $100,000 in illicit cash. And it looks like Glacier National Park visitation will finish the year just short of the post-pandemic surge of 2021. That means 2024 will probably finish as the third busiest year in the park's history. Through September, just over 3 million people had come through Glacier's gates this year, a jump of 300,000 at the same point last year. September's visits soared to over 600,000, once more reflecting the increase we've seen the last few years once those vehicle reservations are lifted. Glacier's all-time record for visitation, 3.3 million people back in 2017.
For more on these stories and others around Montana, download the Montana State News app.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you could do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
We are back. This is Talkback. Having a great conversation today with Dan Wilson, who is running for the office of Justice for the Montana Supreme Court. He's here in studio with us and answering questions from folks like Skip. Skip, good morning. You're on with Dan Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning, Judge Wilson. It's nice to hear you when you describe things. Somebody brought up Rob Nagelson, and all the speakers that I've heard talking about these subjects. It's nice to hear the way that you deliver everything. It's grounded and easy to understand, and it kind of reminds me of Rob's interactive lecture halls when he's on. And I wanted to ask you something I've asked you previously on another venue, and it had to do with, would you explain to us the importance of and the proper use of precedent law in your decisions as a Supreme Court justice, and then also the thing that your competition and also Corey's competition, who would be Jeremiah Lynch, they seem to have a problem with using the word republic. And I asked you that before, and you described the difference between a constitutional republic and a constitutional democracy, which is the only way they like to describe our government. Would you please address both of those? And thank you, sir. And I hope next time I talk to you, they're calling you Justice. Well, thank you a lot.
Thanks for the call, Skip. Go ahead.
It's a real pleasure. Precedent really comes down to this. You've heard candidates say, and perhaps callers and debate and ads talk about the importance of precedent. Precedent really is summed up in the importance of continuity. The idea of a court is that the personnel may change, but the body of law does not change remarkably when there is a change in personnel. And so because people order their day-to-day affairs, because people engage in business, because people engage in investments, because people engage in every sort of activity in Montana, expecting that the laws are something that they can both understand and follow, it's important that the law doesn't go in lurch-type changes. And we want the law to be fairly continuous. Sure, there's room for change over time, but it shouldn't occur in these very sudden kinds of changes. And I think what you'll see electing both me and Corey Swanson to the Montana Supreme Court is we're not there to burn the place down. We're not there to set fire to all these precedents. We're there to respect the law, which includes the law of precedent, but also to consider the arguments that are brought by the parties. If you want to see change on the Supreme Court and you'd like to see them change a precedent, then hire a really good lawyer. Good lawyers make good arguments. We shouldn't be electing Supreme Court justices to be the next versions of our superheroes. We should have lawyers and parties and litigants bringing those arguments to the Supreme Court, and we should expect our Supreme Court to do nothing less than provide a fair and full hearing and not announce what their decisions on any issues are going to be in advance. As between the difference of a constitutional republic versus a constitutional democracy, we've had 7 public forums and debates as Supreme Court candidates. I think that's unprecedented, more than perhaps ever before. And I've heard Jeremiah Lynch say time and time again that we are living in a constitutional democracy under our Constitution, and so majority rule doesn't happen. He argues continuously that I've seen that the Supreme Court's role, among other things, is to push back against the majority. Well, okay. But also, our Constitution provides something here in Montana that the U.S. Constitution doesn't, and that is popular sovereignty. And it says expressly in our Constitution, in one of the first aspects of it, that all political power derives from the people of Montana. The citizens of Montana are the source of political power. And so it is especially important that our Supreme Court be respectful here in Montana of the enactments by our legislature, because they are, in a sense, the most direct link between the source of all political power in Montana, which under our Constitution is the people themselves, and the laws that we end up enacting. So I hope that addresses your question in a way that both you and our listeners can fully appreciate and understand.
You bet. And the timing is perfect because we're up against a break, and we have Steve, Elena, and an app question all waiting to visit, waiting to be addressed by you. We're going to come right back. By the way, our guest here in the studio is Judge Dan Wilson. He's running for the office of Justice of the Montana Supreme Court. And, of course, it's a nonpartisan race. So we're going to come right back with more Talk Back right after this.
How was your drive to school?
Let me tell you, I had to get my iced coffee first. I just can't seem to put it down. My favorite rapper just announced a tour. My phone was buzzing like crazy. I'm so excited. I had to text all my friends right then to talk about it. Then someone started calling me, and
let's try that again.
I turned my phone off right away. I never drive distracted.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Hey, welcome back. Talkback rolls right along this morning. Peter Christian here, Nick Christensen producing Talkback this morning. We do have some phone lines open at 721-1290 to talk with Judge Dan Wilson. And Steve's been waiting the longest. Steve, thank you for your patience. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Peter. I had to chuckle a little bit there at your last comment before the break about this race being, and others like it being nonpartisan, because while they certainly don't have an R or D or any other moniker in front of their name, judges do bring, as Mr. Wilson has already described, pre-described dogmas to their roles. And I've experienced this firsthand, both in Missoula and at the state level and with administrative law judges. And you talk to any lawyer, certainly in Missoula, and they will tell you absolutely this race is partisan by ideology. One of the things that I really appreciate about Mr. Wilson, and I certainly have voted for him already, and I would encourage everyone else listening to vote for him, is as you've listened to him today, he's fair. He's impartial. You can see he takes both sides of an argument and weighs them very carefully. And I would argue that his competition and the others running for re-election right now, Lynch, Brigadieri, et cetera, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly or not, but I apologize if I'm not.
It's Brigadieri, but go ahead.
You would know, Peter. You're the expert here.
Well, no, because she was here in the studio, but go ahead, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. What I do know about both of those people, Lynch and Brigadieri, is that they already have predetermined decisions made in their heads about any legislation that the Montana legislature passes, as Mr. Wilson has already described. Last session, the legislature, for example, passed a very simple law that said for you to show up and vote or to vote, you needed to provide proof, documentation of citizenship. A very reasonable thing to do. You have to do it to board a plane. You have to do it to open a bank account. You have to do it to do any number of things in Montana. To vote, which is a sacred function of citizenry here, should be protected in that same manner. Yet the Supreme Court struck that law down, and many others that the legislature and the governor signed into law last session. It's imperative. If you want to see change happen with the laws of Montana and have them be reasonable and fair, that you elect someone and vote for someone like Mr. Wilson and Mr. Lynch. So good luck to you, Mr. Wilson. I apologize. There's really no question, but I just want to echo all the things you said today. You're doing a great job.
Steve, thanks for the call. Any comments, sir?
Well, to follow up on some of Steve's points, I think he hits the nail on the head. The function of our Supreme Court is to take an approach to questions like, is a law unconstitutional or not, with a very open-minded approach. And when I decided that I was going to run for Supreme Court, I got a lot of warnings that I was going to face a lot of attacks. And these were from people who were familiar with how these races seem to be run in the last couple of years or so. But I decided that I was going to avoid one thing that I knew was going to be a temptation, and that is the temptation to pledge allegiance to special interests in order to get their hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of support. And these requests come in sort of innocuous-looking emails with questionnaires. When you read the questions that they want you to give an unqualified yes answer to, you realize they are one-sided, politicized statements of existing law. They are not fair. They're not balanced in their approach. And if you say no, or if you refuse to answer their questionnaires, which I've done to a number of leftist groups, now I'm facing millions of dollars of attack ads, including the most bizarre one that's funded by former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, a famous anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment activist who may have seen that I and Corey Swanson are both endorsed by the Montana Shooting Sports Association. And so he sent $750,000 to some ad agency or political group to attack me, falsely saying I'm running for the Supreme Court to shut down public access. And I thought, good grief, Michael, we've never met, but he wasn't there. You know, when my grandpa taught me to fish up on Nelson Reservoir through public access when I was 6 years old, he wasn't there when I floated the Gallatin fly fishing with my dad and brothers, or when I even volunteered to improve public hiking trails in a state park here in Montana. It's nonsense. These attack ads are made because there's a vain hope that they may land with people and have them vote based on fear rather than being fully informed. So I knew this was going to be an uphill battle. I knew it was going to be harder because I'm taking a principled approach to the job, because I'm taking a principled approach to this campaign, and I'm not pledging allegiance to any outside group or party. I've not made a promise about any decision I would ever make, and my record as a judge totally supports that approach.
All right, let's get another call in. This is Elena. She's been waiting the longest. Elena, thank you for holding. Go ahead, please. You're on with Dan Wilson.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, Judge Wilson, from what you say, you're in the Flathead Lake area. You've been a judge there. You're still a judge, I believe, there. And so I want to bring up a question to you that apparently nobody wants to touch, even though it is a current issue. And I'm sure you're aware that right now there's close to 2,000 people that are objectors before the Water Court regarding the CSKT Water Compact. And I want to know exactly what you know of it, and if you are elected, what's your stand on it? The question was given to Corey Swanson, and he didn't settle the issue. It is an issue, and it's not going to end. So what do you know about it? And if you're elected, where would you stand on this?
Yeah, I know that the water compact.
Thanks, Elena.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
the water compact is not fully approved and implemented, and there are yet legal issues and challenges to be decided. It's a big case.
Well,
it is a huge case, and it's important that as judges or justices that we enter into those conflicts with an open mind and not with any sort of preconceived or promised outcome. We elect and hire, in a sense, our legislators and our governors to advance our policy interests. We vote for them because they have promised to vote in a certain way. We don't elect judges to advance our policy agendas, legal, political, or otherwise. We elect our judges to resolve those disputes fully and fairly only after listening to both sides. So I can't take a stand other than to say I stand for the law and the Constitution and would pay particular attention to the objectors because they have very vital interests at stake. And it's important that as justices, we acknowledge and give full faith to those interests and their legal arguments before ultimately making a decision.
Now, I think one of the things you said very eloquently just a moment ago is one of the reasons why this is a, quote, nonpartisan race. Is because we can't expect you to side with us or side with someone else. You go by the arguments that are presented to you and by precedent.
It's a great point that you make, Peter. We do make the decisions based on the arguments. The parties, the stakeholders, the special interests are lining up behind candidates because they can, and they view one or the other as being better ultimately for their chances in the future. I'm running, I hope, in the truest sense of a nonpartisan race and in the better aspects of the traditions of nonpartisan races where I don't and haven't made any promises for certain outcomes or certain rulings on any case. It's important, like I liken the running for the Supreme Court like, we appoint the head referee for the Brawl of the Wild. Can you imagine what it would be like if we were announced that we were going to elect the head referee for that game? And then we had them give their speeches and they get up and they say, I'm for the rules, I'm for fairness, but I've been a Grizz fan all my life. The Cat fans would feel horrible about that choice and vice versa. So it's important that we remember that judges are more like referees than they are like politicians. And that's how we keep politics out of these races.
And I'm noticing that when you came today, you're not either wearing a maroon or a blue tie. So
yeah, I'm wearing red, white, and blue.
We're going to come right back. 721-1290 is our number. We have all of our phone lines are open, and Nick has an app question for you when we come back. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Our guest here in the studio, Judge Dan Wilson, running for the office of Justice of the Montana Supreme Court, and we would love to hear from you. We'll be right back.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I like a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
We are back. This is Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. And Nick, we have an app question for Dan Wilson. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Brandon said, what is your thought on the safety of our children and the locations of homeless shelters pretty close to schools? Would it be unconstitutional to pass a bill requiring a proximity requirement where a homeless shelter cannot be located in a certain distance from a school, like maybe 3 to 5 miles? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, these sorts of issues come up quite a bit, and they are most properly dealt with first through all of the political branches, through all of the agencies that have primary responsibility for determining whether these things should happen. And it's not strictly unconstitutional to provide these sorts of buffer zones, and this has been done frequently for things like locating bars, places that could impact children's interests and so forth.
It has to do with zoning.
So,
Okay.
yeah, and so it's not strictly unconstitutional. I can't say that a particular buffer zone like 3 to 5 miles is unconstitutional or not. In fact, there was quite a controversy several years ago when there was a poll put out to district court judges in Montana asking them whether they approved of a proposed change in how vacancies would be filled when a judge would retire or die in midterm. The governor wanted to change the lay of the land so that he would appoint, this was Gianforte, so that he would appoint them directly. And that poll came around, and I was one of a handful of judges who didn't respond to it because I recognized right away this is improper. This is improper for a judge or a justice to weigh in on whether a change in the law is desirable, precisely because judges ultimately hear those challenges. So I cannot say that the rule you're proposing would or would not be unconstitutional, but I think that goes to my credit, frankly, because any judge or justice who off the cuff would say this or that is unconstitutional is frankly violating their own oath, because we only undertake those sorts of questions and make those sorts of decisions on the most searching review after looking at all of the arguments, after looking at existing law. So I wish I could answer your question with a yes or no quick answer, but any competent judge would never do that.
Well, let's put it this way: in your world, when you start out as an attorney, you are on somebody's side. You're advocating for one side or the other, right?
Right.
But when you move up to the judge's bench, and that, does that mindset have to disappear, or do you have to reorder things?
No, it's there all along. You know, when you represent someone as an attorney, you don't necessarily agree with every stance they're taking personally. You don't necessarily invest all of your emotional energy and moral views along with theirs. You present their interests under the law, and you do so objectively, realizing that you owe a duty of loyalty to that client, regardless of whether the public likes them or hates them, regardless of whether you personally agree with their stance or not. That is the essence of being a professional. So when you go from an attorney to a judge, you're simply maintaining the best part of that tradition by not making rulings based on what your personal feelings are. And if you were a good attorney, you should have been representing your clients with that sort of separation between their views and yours all along.
All right. We have another app question. Nick, please go ahead.
Yeah, Sandy said if the Montana Supreme Court is the last stop before the U.S. Supreme Court, where does the Ninth Circuit Court fall in line? She said, I bring this question with the knowledge that the Ninth Circuit Court Grants Pass urban camping decision was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. So she was hoping for a quick 101 lesson, if you could.
Well, and that is a super good question, because it shows me that the question is coming from someone who's giving it a lot of thought.
Sandy's one of our city councilors, but go ahead.
There you go. The short answer is that there are two parallel systems of courts that can get a question from the lowest court to the highest court in the land, which is the U.S. Supreme Court. So even a city court or justice of the peace court has the same authority as a federal district court to interpret and apply the U.S. Constitution. Every justice of the peace, city court judge, district court judge, Montana Supreme Court justice takes the same oath to be loyal to the U.S. and Montana Constitution. So if a case comes up under a federal issue in a district court in Montana, for example, a state district court, the appeal from that court goes to the Montana Supreme Court, and then if there's an appeal further on a federal question, it goes directly from the U.S. Supreme Court, from the Montana Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court. there is this parallel court system, the federal system. And if you were to bring a federal challenge to a law or something under the U.S. Supreme Court, under federal law, you could bring it in a U.S. District Court. From there, it goes to the Ninth Circuit. And from there would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. So if there's an appeal generally of a federal question from the Montana Supreme Court, it would not go to the Ninth Circuit. It would go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And with that, we are up against another break, and we have Pat waiting. By the way, very, very well explained. Thank you. Even I understood that.
Good.
So you're good. We're going to go right back after this 1 minute timeout. Stay with us.
Break.
Welcome back. This is Talk Back. We're in the final segment with Judge Dan Wilson here in the studio, running for Justice of the Montana Supreme Court. And Pat has been waiting throughout the break. Pat, good morning. You're on with Judge Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Judge Wilson. Thank you so much for coming and being on Talk Back. And I just want to say it's refreshing to have someone that does understand how you are supposed to go into the Supreme Court. I have already voted for you. I'm praying that voters see through the lies that your opponent has been putting out. And I just want to thank you for being at the Frontier Cafe to meet with us tonight at 5:30.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. Thanks for the call, Pat. Go ahead.
The question of lies. I mean, the First Amendment protects all sorts of speech. It doesn't have to necessarily be true. There are very few limits on what you can say about a candidate. And I've decided that when I was going to run, I was not going to spend my time and resources, and my resources being the fairly limited amount of money I can raise to support my campaign, which it looks like is being outmatched over 10-1. By the sort of lies and hate speech that's being directed toward my campaign. But I decided I wasn't going to spend my limited time and resources attacking my opponent. And I've avoided that. And when I said earlier that I'm running this campaign in what I consider to be the best tradition of nonpartisan races, it's just that. I mean, people associate partisanship with the attacks. And I thought, I can't do anything about what other people are going to say, but I can control what I do, what I think, my values, and my message. And my message has been to stand on my record and my qualifications as a basis for my candidacy for this Montana Supreme Court position. And it's not to be to belittle or to degrade or attack a fellow judge who is also seeking that office. Whether she's been successful in that sort of undertaking is up for the voters to decide. But I decided early on that it's not good for Montana or the judiciary if I spend all my time and limited resources just attacking my opponent.
Well, you have to agree there are mighty forces at play here, because even though you and your opponent are nonpartisan, there are groups, agencies, movements that are doing everything they can to try to convince people not to vote for you because you're not on their side, or because they think you're on the other side somehow.
Well, and sides, whether I'm on someone's side or not, is really sort of a deceptive and incomplete way of looking at it from the outside. I haven't taken any side, and that's what's been refreshing. When I first got involved in this race, I was at a meeting, and at that meeting there was a very experienced politician, and this person came up to me and was sort of chit-chatting, and I ultimately asked this person who's been elected to the legislature a number of times, I said, why are you supporting me? And he or she said, because I promised not to use the name, said, look, we've watched you as a judge over the years. We've seen your rulings. We understand who you are. We know that we're not going to win every single case in front of you, but we're voting for you because we know you'll be fair. And I've never received such a compliment as a judge, frankly, and I've avoided scrupulously making promises or advanced statements of this is how I'll rule, because it's important that we still elect judges on the basis that they're going to listen to both sides, They don't go to the bench. They don't go to the Supreme Court having already basically decided cases one way or the other. We can't have a judiciary do that. Otherwise, we're just going to have a super legislature. We're just going to have judicial activism instead of having justices that stay in their lane and follow the law, obedient to the Constitution, as opposed to trying to refashion it in their own image.
We have another app question. Go ahead, Nick, please.
Yeah, real quick. Bev said, why hasn't the possibility of using fingerprint ID to vote to ensure election integrity been brought up? And what are your thoughts on maybe using this?
Well, I mean, I don't know why it hasn't been brought up. Perhaps it's an expense thing or an equipment thing or a technology thing. But, you know, we are going to keep seeing a debate in the legislature about just how we ensure safe and accurate elections and electoral processes. This debate is not going to stop. It's not going to go away. And it's important that we have a Supreme Court that is not hostile to any change, that could either provide a more efficient running electoral system or a more accurate one. So I don't know why it's not come up, but you can be assured that having made this call, it may all be discussed in the next legislative session.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes for you to jump up on the stump and explain why people should vote for you, sir.
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. You know, I think the best antidote for the lies and the misstatements that are out there against me is you're providing me this opportunity to talk to people directly. I mean, we're not face to face, but it's just about as good an alternative as you could possibly get, being able to talk on the radio, to have people hear my voice, to hear not only my explanations, but my record and what I stand for. The Montana Supreme Court is exceptionally important. It works best when we go to sleep at night trusting that the justice is up there, whatever sort of controversy they might be facing, whatever sort of difficult case they might be needing to resolve, that we can be sure that they are going to decide those cases fairly after listening to both sides. And what we want is what I offer, both through my commitment of more than 30 years in the legal profession, more than 12 years on a bench, as a judge, a record that is firmly established as a judge who follows the law, who doesn't make it up as he goes along, who doesn't rule on legal issues with regard to his own personal preferences, but is instead obedient to both the Constitution and the rule of law and respects it going forward.
How about a website if people want to donate to your campaign or to find out more about you?
Sure. I'd appreciate anyone visiting my website. They can find out a great deal about me and what people have endorsed me and organizations at wilsonforjustice.com. All one word, wilsonforjustice.com.
It's been a great pleasure meeting you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. You bet. Absolutely. Okay, Mr. Nick, what's coming up on tomorrow? Now, tomorrow's Friday, of course. We only have a 1 hour show.
Yeah, we'll just be on from 9 to 10 tomorrow, and it will be a City Talk show. Ginny and special guests.
All right, so there you go. It's another opportunity for you to reach out and visit with folks who are doing things that affect your everyday life here in Missoula. That's what City Talk and County Talk really are about. And so that's one of the reasons why we do it, and we're looking forward to that visit coming up. And again, a big thank you to Ben and, of course, also to Dan for both of you being with us today. We appreciate it. All right. And listen, we hope that you'll join us tomorrow morning. And remember, we have Hunter's Breakfast. It's the final Hunter's Breakfast before opening day, which is coming up on Saturday. So that's coming up at 8 o'clock. And then, of course, at 9, it will be Talk Back. And as Nick just mentioned, it'll be City Talk. So we're looking forward to having you there as well.